Okay, we are recording. All right. So again, welcome to day 4 of the RadResponder nationwide drill. Today is going to be focusing on public messaging and responder situational awareness. Our webinar topics for today, we'll give a brief day 3 recap. We'll talk about public messaging and resources. We'll then talk about day 4 logistics and the action items that you'll need to complete for today. So congratulations for making it to day 4 of the RadResponder nationwide drill, preparedness through partnerships. Today is the last day where we are having our 1-hour daily sessions. And like I mentioned, today's focus is on public messaging and responder situational awareness. For tomorrow, we will be meeting at a different time to hopefully accommodate some more of our partners, particularly on the West Coast. So tomorrow, the closing webinar at Hot Wash is at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And the webinar is not going to be through Teams. We are going to be meeting through GoToWebinar, which is how you registered for this drill. So if you need to re-get that link, I can put the registration link in the chat again, but you are going to be using that GoToWebinar link that you would have received when you registered for the drill to join us tomorrow. As a reminder on how this drill was split up, each region was assigned ROS task force leaders to assist with the drill coordination, providing guidance and offering suggestions. We are using the RAP region, so there are 7 regions and therefore 7 events that you all were working in. So depending on your region and the state that you are located in, you either joined the region 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7's nationwide drill event in RadResponder. And I will now hand it over to Bill to give us some information on what day 4 is going to involve.
Thanks, Christine. So it was a lot dumped on all of you for work yesterday, and we're not really going to add additional data to your collection. We are going to instead ask you to use that same data for specific purposes, and that's today public messaging and situational awareness, both for the public and for responders. So you had a little taste of that with one of your participant guide questions about what kind of briefings might you give, what audiences might you brief, what kind of data might you share in that. This day 4 allows you to kind of extend what you started yesterday with another day of review of that data and using it for that specific purpose, as we said. It's important for you to know that for today, the data has all been approved or validated. It was one of the most remarkable field team efforts in the history of radiation protection. But it will make it easier for you to use any data or consider the use of data, since you're not actually going to manipulate data, just its representation. And we want you to try to think about, maybe even create in some cases, public messages for different audiences. And there's really good guidance to help you in that. We could go to the next slide. The first is that we want to, but before we look at that guidance, I want to just try to emphasize very important element of messaging. If people get conflicting messages, they're not going to know which to believe. And as we've seen in COVID and some other incidents of significance, if that happens, we lose trust, and trust is something very easy to lose and sometimes impossible but always very hard to regain. So we need to work together in our partnerships to have a uniform message that underlies all of the different messages, because there are going to be so many of different purposes and for different audiences. But we all need to agree on certain key elements of it and be careful to not let there be deviations that could create that disuniformity and potential loss of trust. And that might mean that you, in reality, not here in the exercise, monitor what the public is seeing and what the public is saying about what they see. So it's important not just ground truthing data, but it's also ground truthing messages. I really appreciate the work of the CDC as an example where, and EPA has done this too, where they have brought in focus groups to look at messages about radiological and nuclear emergencies, the questions people have and the answers being given. And they say, did the answer really answer the question for you? We need to always look at that validation of our messages as much as we validate our data. And then we have to think about who it is that's going to send it out. And one of the things I've seen this week is a lot of people thought, well, we're right on the scene there. We're going to be the center of direction for a lot of things. And it was quickly realized this is so much larger and it's going to evolve. It could be that it is someone from local government. It could be state government. I think it's very likely to be a mixture of the federal government because it's never happened before. It's really affected a lot of jurisdictions, and state government would be there, and maybe local government would be there, as well as subject matter experts to have a unified command, even in the messaging, the information. And whoever it is that's out in front, it's often someone that people really trust that you would want to turn to. And that's someone that you might even have some ideas about and be thinking about as part of the overall response. Next slide. So we mentioned we've got resources in RadResponder is the public information resource library. You can see there's infographics, there's PIO, Public Information Officer resource translations. A lot of those infographics are translated. Pre-scripted public messages. These are really valuable because you want to be able to pull some messages out within the first minutes after an incident has occurred to give people specific information to know what to do, to understand what's going on, to understand, even though we don't have all the information, at least the basics and what they should do. And then obviously something important like radionuclide fact sheets are there. Next slide. This is perhaps one of the better ones for this particular scenario. This is a CDC product. What's really nice about this, even if you can't get to a particular language translation because it's a unique language, this is designed that you don't need to be able to read. You don't need to read English to understand what is going on here. It's radiation from a bomb, and we want you to get inside. And then once you're inside, stay inside, and then stay tuned. That's a really good message for this particular scenario and for a lot of radiological and nuclear emergency scenarios. Next slide, please. We're very lucky that the Department of Homeland Security's National Urban Security and Technology Laboratory has created this document on the left, the RDD response guidance, planning for the first 100 minutes. It's available at the link you see there. You can Google it and get it. It's been followed with a companion document that takes it beyond the first 100 minutes for the next several days and the start of recovery. Really good in both cases to have both of these documents in your collection of references and for your building of plans. Especially good is the first one, the 2017 document for that plan building. It has an annex to help you build plans, but it also has an annex for public messaging guidance. And you can see it has built into the guidance, there's 10 tactics in 5 mission areas, a tactic devoted to issuing protective action to the public. It happens really early and it's critical because if you don't get information out there fast, and you're going to have that information fill that void, and it may be inaccurate information from a variety of sources. And the annex for public messaging actually has some templates. I would encourage you, if you have a chance in your teams today, to take a look at that annex to see, it's relatively brief, it can be read in a few minutes, how they have crafted 5 key messages for that first 100 minutes. They're brief, to the point, clear, leave very few questions unanswered. And that's, of course, what we always want to try to do. Next slide, please. So you can't overstress how important messaging is because there's just not enough responders to do everything for everyone. We need to help the public help themselves, and we need to train first responders so that they can learn how to protect themselves. And some of that is going to come through just-in-time training, and that is in itself a kind of messaging. In this case, it's responder messaging. And everyone understands and appreciates and acts on more commonly when they understand why you want them to do it. Just saying do it can help some people who just follow orders, but there are others who really question everything, and we need to tell them why, especially when we're asking them to shelter in place when a lot of people want to run away. That's going to create a lot of problems. It'll free, if they shelter, it'll free up the whole scene for life-saving, to care for the injured, for law enforcement investigations, restoring critical infrastructure, and they're protected. They're not getting contaminated, and we'll eventually have a planned, staged evacuation of the area after we get someplace like a community reception center set up for them to go to be screened. And since that is going to take time, because this is no notice, no fixed facility, we're going to need to tell people how to do self-decon because it takes time to set up those CRCs, and we need to minimize that exposure early and minimize the spread of contamination. And we'll always have to be looking at our old messaging, what needs to be updated, repeat key messages from the original, try to keep those key threads going throughout, and then always review for accuracy. Next slide. So data is really important for that public messaging because it helps to define where resources are needed most, where access and egress are restricted. I did an exercise in San Francisco for an RDD, and they had trained for weeks on being prepared for this exercise. And as soon as it kicked off, everybody just kind of sat in their EOC chairs and stood at their EOC positions, not knowing what to do first because so much was coming at them all at once from radios and television and by word of mouth. And I grabbed the RadResponder, put this overlay like you've created for this incident up on the screen and said, look, this is what it is. Soon as they saw a map, they understood where it was, where the effects were, where they could set up all the resources need to help without those resources being in the way and getting compromised by the situation. So we're going to really benefit all activities from every EOC down to the incident command post by putting data out there that shows people where it is and where they can work and what they and then use that to help them in their planning and operations. And obviously, new data is going to come in. We need to tell people that they'll see changes. If things change and we don't build that expectation for change because new information comes in, because what we're doing is changing the situation, then they might lose trust again. So remind them it will change. Next slide, please. So there will be differences in messages, of course, especially where you have the unimpacted neighboring support messages or jurisdictions. Their messages are going to be about, look, there's no risk here. And then inside the impacted regions, yes, we have risk. We are characterizing it. We've got people working on it. We need you to do this. We need to be able to prove what we're saying, and a map can help with that. And also, of course, that map needs to be made with data. And it starts with modeling, but as soon as we possibly can, we need to get measurements because that's the real measure of it in the world, that we're taking people to physically go to a specific scene and collect that, and we can prove all of those different steps, and it helps people, especially if they could see here's some responders out doing something on the TV news, and making sure that the messaging that is coming out from that incident, that we realize that where there are no risks, that messaging may be the most important, because we kind of know how to respond to emergencies. We've, by this point in time, really understanding how we work in contamination, how we work with minor radiation dose level increases, but we have to make sure that those people outside of those impacted areas don't immerse our healthcare system in a flood of patients who don't need to be there, that we don't overwhelm our other responders. And it helps to restore calm, and it can provide hope that as they look out, they see it's really pretty small areas that are just marginally impacted. And very likely we can reduce that in terms of scope over time. And again, those maps are critical. And we're going to ask you to try to find maps, use those maps as we go. Next slide. All right, we're going to turn this over to Christine. And again, I want to thank all of you for what you've been doing this week in this exercise. I've really been impressed with the effort and the products that come out of it.
Thanks, Bill. So as you look into day 4, the participant guides are uploaded both in a Word doc and PDF version. You will notice that this is a little bit longer than some of the other participant guides, and that's because we are not expecting each individual person to answer them all. Delegation for day 4 is key. Work with your region, work with your ROS leads to determine what your agency would do. You know, maybe your agency isn't giving messaging to the public, but you still want to be involved in that conversation and those discussions. So again, delegate which messages should go to different organizations and individuals. And it's also going to depend on your jurisdiction. If you are the state where the incident occurred, you're going to have a different message than a non-bordering state may have. You'll see that there are 3 different sections. So the first section is messaging to the incident management team. The second section is messaging to responders and data collectors. And the 4th section is messaging to the public. Save your answers and your guides. That way we can use your responses and insights for the drill after action report. How you want to share your materials is up to you. Maybe you just want to have one participant guide saved for the entire region. Again, it's whatever your ROS task force leads and your region decides to do. Like I mentioned, both of the PDF and Word document versions of Day 4's participant guide is available in the resource library, and I believe someone put a link in the chat to download it. As always, the resource library is going to have everything you need for this drill. You'll open up your RadResponder page, select resources from the top, scroll down to where you see documents, and you will see a 2024 RadResponder Nationwide Drill Preparedness Through Partnerships folder. That's going to have the daily kickoff meeting slides and each day's participant guide. A few things for you to work on before the closing webinar and hot wash tomorrow. Among your region, have all those public messaging questions answered and remember to delegate them. And take the time to revisit any questions or actions from the previous days that you may have missed. And please fill out our post-drill survey, which I'll talk more on that next slide. And for my ROS task force leaders, we will send you an email with some more information, but think about preparing just one slide about how your regionals drill went and your various findings. And again, Bill and I will send out an email to you all with some specifics on this, but we just want to have a briefing, which is a little repetitive, but we just want to hear from you during the hot wash tomorrow on, again, how the drill went for you and for your region as a whole. At the bottom of the Day 4 participant guide, you will see a link to our Nationwide Drill post-drill survey. Filling this out is going to be incredibly helpful for us so we can compile some analytics for the hot wash tomorrow to share with you all. It should only take you about 2 to 3 minutes, and you can choose to be anonymous. We definitely want to see your feedback, and please be as honest as possible. This nationwide drill is very different than the ones we've done in the past, so we want to know if you liked this format, if you didn't like this format, or if you were somewhere in between. I will also post this link in the chat so you have an easy way to access that. And with that, I want you all to use the remaining time during this session to coordinate with your region and complete your Day 4 tasks. Also, you can go back and revisit any tasks that you may have missed or didn't have time to complete. I know a lot of you all have your own separate Teams meetings. You are more than welcome to invite Bill and I to those if you would like to have some additional eyes or insight. We would love to be a part of that, again, if you want to extend that to us. And if you have any questions, please email them to support@cburnresponder.net and do not use this Teams chat to ask questions after this meeting, because I do want, again, to try to keep this one clean so people can access the links that were shared and a variety of the other information. So with that, I'm going to end the recording.